right, so as you're joining us, we want to welcome everyone. We're going to get started with our phenomenal panel that we have planned for you, just because I know I want them to start sharing their story, and I know that you all will have great questions for them during the Q&A section. I want to share that the session is being recorded, and we will be sharing it with all participants after this particular program is done. Some digital community guidelines. If you're not familiar with the way a webinar on Zoom works, down at the bottom of your Zoom meeting, you're going to have a Q&A box. So if you have any questions that you would like to submit for our panel, you can submit your questions via the Q&A box. There's also a chat box, which some of you have already been using, responding to different questions. If you want to share any relevant comments or thoughts with the community during this particular webinar, you can use the chat box. And then also we ask that you maintain a respectful and collaborative environment during this webinar. I'll introduce myself. I'm Christina Fernandez. I'm Senior Director of Programs with the TGR Foundation. With the TGR Foundation, we are really excited to welcome our three distinguished panelists. We have Chief Judge Foley, we have Sarah Julie Tchokouani, and I'm mispronouncing her name, even though I've known her for so many years. I won't say how many years, but she's always Sarah Julie to me. And then of course, Michael Desmond. And with this particular panel, we really wanted to focus on not just exploring and sort of thinking about pursuing careers in the legal field, but having each of our panelists share their journey with you. You all submitted some great questions prior to or during your registration of this particular webinar, and we took that to heart as they prepared each of their remarks. And then what'll happen is after each of our panelists shares a little bit about their journey, we'll do some Q&A, and then we will close it out from there. So I'd like to introduce Chief Judge Foley as our first panelist. And you're muted, Chief Judge Foley.
There we go. All right. Thank you. Thank you, Christina. It's a pleasure for me to speak to all of you today. And I understand in talking to Christina that probably more than 50% of you are interested in the STEM field. And of course, I'm not involved in the STEM field, but I am involved in tax. So in a sense, we're in the same family, because folks who are involved in STEM and folks who are involved in tax are all looked at as if they're a little peculiar, a little odd, a little nerdy, and some say we're just downright weird. So we're all in the same family, and I can say that because I'm in the tax field, and I have a daughter who is in the STEM field, and she's currently getting her MD PhD. And in fact, today she sent me a copy of an article that's her very first published article. And she just sent me the abstract, and she asked me if I wanted to see the whole article. And after looking at the abstract, I looked at the first few sentences, and it talked about all these mutations in signal transducers and annual immunophenotypings of patients with homozygous mutations. And I said, no, that's all right. That's all right. That's the abstract's just fine. So I'd like to tell you a little bit about my path and kind of let you know how I got involved in the tax field, because it's not something that a lot of people are attracted to. So I began tell you a little bit about my background. I was from a family. My father was in the Air Force, and we traveled around a lot. I lived in some very obscure, desolate places in my life. I lived in Utah, I lived in North Dakota, but my dad retired in California. And I went to a large public high school in in Sacramento, California. I left there and I went to Swarthmore College. My large public high school didn't really prepare me very well for Swarthmore College. It was a very, very intense academic environment. And my very first semester was pass-fail, and I was failing. There may have been maybe one class or two classes that I was performing well in. So my first semester was very, very difficult. And in fact, before the end of my first semester, I found myself before the Student Judicial Council. And I had my first introduction to the legal system when I was in my freshman year. So I was thrown out of college for stealing. And I had to leave Swarthmore. I went to Temple University to complete my first year. And I didn't return to Swarthmore until my sophomore year. But when I returned, I was very focused and dedicated to graduate on time and to do very well. So that early misstep in my career really shaped and formed and changed me. And when I came back, I was a completely different person. But I was very behind the rest of my classmates. So when I came back, I wanted to major in poli-sci and economics. And I wanted to get a concentration in public policy and Black studies. So I took a class, and it was team taught by a political science professor and an economist. And for a week during that, in the middle of that semester, they talked about tax policy, and that's when I decided I wanted to be a tax attorney. I didn't know anything about taxes. I didn't have an accounting background. I wasn't really interested in math. But I got interested in tax from a policy perspective, because they talked about how through the tax system you could induce certain types of behavior. And the thing that really attracted me is they talked about these urban enterprise zones, these tax incentives for depressed urban areas. And for the first time, I could see the nexus between economics and politics. And I could also see that all of the things that I was studying, economics, politics, public policy, and Black studies, were all kind of wrapped up in that one proposal. So enterprise zones weren't the law at that point. They were just an academic idea, and it interested me. So I decided I wanted to be a tax attorney. I didn't know anything about tax law, but I had a professor who actually taught that class, and I told him I wanted to be a tax attorney, and he became my mentor. And as my mentor, he did numerous things for me, but I'll highlight a few of them. One of them is he helped me with my writing. He taught me how to write clearly, concisely, and he also helped prepare me for graduate school. He arranged my prep classes for the entrance exams, and he has been my mentor my entire life. In fact, he's still alive, and we actually set up. I actually went back about a decade ago and set up a mentoring program at Swarthmore to replicate the support he gave me over the years. So I left college, went to law school, and ultimately, after graduating from law school, worked for the Office of Chief Counsel, where Chief Counsel Desmond is in charge. He wasn't in charge then, but that was my first job out of law school, which really prepared me and allowed me to develop some expertise in tax. I worked there for 4 years, and then I worked there for 2 years, and then I worked for the Senate Finance Committee. And at the Senate Finance Committee, I drafted tax legislation and legislative history. I did that for about 4.5 years before going to the Treasury Department, where I worked for the Clinton administration. And while there, curiously, I was put on the task force to develop enterprise zones, the very thing that attracted me to tax when I was in college. Several years later, I was put on the task force and given the responsibility for drafting the first federal program in enterprise zones. So I did that for 2 years, and then I was appointed to the tax court in 1995. I was the first African American appointed to the tax court, and I was 34 years old at the time. I've been on the court for a little more than 25 years, and I've been chief judge for 3 years. So that's my background. I look forward to answering some of your questions and hearing more about what all of you are concerned about. Now, I'd like to turn the floor over to Sarah Julie Tchokouani, who is currently a judicial law clerk at Sussex County Court of Common Pleas in Delaware. She's a graduate of the Ohio State University, where she majored in political science, and Penn State University Dickinson Law School, where she earned a certificate in entrepreneurship law and was on the Trial Advocacy Board. She's also an alum of the Earl Woods Scholar Program and the first graduate of the program to be working as a lawyer. But I'm sure she's not going to be the last graduate of the program who will be working as a lawyer. So with that said, I turn the floor over to Sarah Julie.
Thank you, Chief Judge Foley, for that introduction. Hello, everyone. Good afternoon or good evening, depending on where you're tuning in from. My name is Sarah Julie Tchokouani, and I am very grateful and excited to be here speaking with all of you today. I would first like to thank Ms. Christina and all of her colleagues and the entire Tiger Woods Foundation for putting this event together. I love engaging with people who are younger than me regarding the law or careers in law. So I'm grateful to have been invited as a panelist. Just a little bit about myself. I grew up in Prince George's County, Maryland. I am first generation, as some of you also may be. I am a child of immigrant parents from West Africa, Cameroon. As a senior in high school, I was blessed to be chosen as a recipient of the Earl Woods Scholar Program, as Chief Judge mentioned. So for all of the senior high schoolers who are on here today, I would highly, highly, highly encourage all of you to apply if you're eligible. And for any juniors or sophomores who may be in high school, I would also encourage you guys to look into the program and to apply if you're eligible. For college, I went to the Ohio State University, majored in political science, minored in business. And I will say that throughout my entire college career, the Tiger Woods Foundation was very instrumental in the success of my undergrad career. They not only offer financial assistance, but they truly care about all of their scholars. They invest in all of their scholars. They encourage us to excel and really push us to succeed in undergrad. And they also ensure that all of their scholars remain in good mental health and emotional health, which can sometimes be challenging when you're in college. So again, I highly, highly encourage everyone who is in high school, whether you're a senior now or not, to look into the Earl Woods Scholarship Program. And if you're eligible, to really consider applying to it, because it will make a huge difference while you're in college. After college, I attended Dickinson Law, Penn State Dickinson Law, where I focused my area of study to business corporate law. Going into law school, I had the privilege of already knowing what area of law I wanted to practice. That's not really common. A lot of people go into law school not really sure, but I knew I wanted to practice business corporate law when I went into law school, which is why I minored in business. So once I got to law school, I was able to immediately focus my studies on business corporate law. And by doing so, I earned a certificate in entrepreneurship law with a concentration in transactional law. I'm currently completing a clerkship in the Sussex County Court of Common Pleas in Delaware, and will soon be transitioning and moving into actually practicing business and corporate law, and being able to apply all of the education I learned throughout law school and all of the essential skills I've learned during my clerkship in order to better serve businesses and corporations and all of those wonderful things that I'm interested in. Yeah, so that's it for me. You will now have the privilege of hearing from Mr. Michael Desmond. He is currently the Chief Counsel of the IRS. And if I'm not mistaken, he has dedicated his entire legal career to the practice of tax law. He is very experienced in the field of tax law. He's practiced in both private and the government sector. And at one point, he even owned his own boutique tax law firm. And in addition to all of that, he has also served as a professor at Georgetown University Law School. So over to you, Michael.
Great. Thank you so much, Sarah Julie, and good to hear from you, and also always to hear from Chief Judge Foley. I wanted to also thank the Tiger Woods Foundation for having me here this afternoon and an opportunity to talk to all of you and share with you what I hope you will take as some of the enthusiasm that I know Chief Judge Foley bring to the practice of law. It's also very encouraging to hear that there are a number of students with us here this afternoon that are interested in STEM topics and probably studying STEM topics as high school students and in college. And I say that because I think there are some great intersections between the law and STEM topics here at the IRS and in other areas of the law. Bringing a number of technology issues to bear is very important for us. And we have a number of lawyers here at the IRS and in other practices of law, other fields of law that do have deep backgrounds in the sciences and in technology. So I want to talk a little bit about what we do here at the IRS and also in the practice of law generally, and maybe spark some interest in some of you to continue pursuing your interest in STEM, but also think about law as a backstop as well, or maybe a complement to your primary interests in STEM topics. So again, good to hear that there's a good diversity of fields and interests on the call here this afternoon. So I'll just give a little summary of my journey and how I got here to the Office of Chief Counsel in Washington, D.C. And I take it back, and I know we've got a number of high school students on the line, so I'll talk a little bit about where my head was when I was in high school. I see we have a number of folks here, a handful anyway, from San Diego, which is where I grew up, like Chief Judge Foley, a California native, and went to public high school in San Diego. As a sophomore and junior in high school, I had my heart set on becoming an airline pilot, of all things. And that's really where I focused. At the time, the San Diego Public Schools had a magnet program that had a program, those of you from San Diego who know Morse High School. I attended Morse High School for a couple of years in their magnet program to study aviation. And again, with my heart set on a career in aviation and perhaps an airline pilot. Sometime I think in my junior or senior year, I realized that although I was not entirely blind, my eyesight was not something that would lend itself to a future career as an airline pilot or in the military or anything along those lines. So I had to level set a little bit later in high school and find a different path forward. So I was fortunate to grow up in California, where we have a very robust public school system, both in high schools and also the University of California system. So I went from high school in San Diego to the University of California in Santa Barbara and spent 4 years there, not focused on aviation or airlines or becoming a pilot, but really migrating my interest more toward public policy. So ended up with a dual major in political science and history, and had a real political interest, a policy interest, and started thinking about opportunities outside of California to see what else was out there. So I graduated from college in 1990 and immediately moved to the East Coast and found myself working for a member of Congress from Northern California. So I started after graduating, I think in August or September of 1990. And my first real introduction into politics was the election in November of 1990, when the member I had just gotten a job with promptly lost his election after 4 or 5 terms in Congress. So realized that things don't necessarily last too long in the political world. So I was immediately looking for a new job, found work with a congressional committee, the House Veterans Affairs Committee, for about the rest of the year, I guess, and continued to develop my interest in policy, which for many of you, you can probably imagine leads to an interest in law school. Tax was nowhere on my radar screen at the time, and I think I looked at law school here in Washington, D.C. at Catholic University as an opportunity to keep involved in the political arena and the policy arena, and perhaps pursue interests after law school in the legislative realm where I was working at the time. So that was kind of my mindset entering into law school. I'd taken a year off, as I said, to work on the Hill, but was really kind of focused on that and did not have tax anywhere near my radar screen. I wasn't even really sure what tax was beyond the returns that I would file each year. And so I was focused more on the basic courses in law school, which tend to involve procedural rules and litigation and contracts and those kinds of things. And not until my second year in law school, when I took a basic income tax course, did my focus start to shift. So and it's a somewhat similar story to Chief Judge Foley, first saw tax, again, going into this and thinking that tax lawyers, did a lot of numbers and accounting and prepared returns and wore green eye shades and had a lot of calculators on their desks. Quickly realized that that is an important part of tax, but by no means is what tax is about. Tax is, as Chief Judge Foley said, very heavily policy driven. And I think in my second or third course in that tax class, realized that there are elements of tax that really manifest themselves in absolutely every socioeconomic policy you can think of, be it retirement policy or education policy or environmental policy or social policy, housing policy, any socioeconomic area that you are interested in is one that we have one or maybe many tax code provisions that relate to that. And that's why I say, for students that have an interest in STEM issues or even just general policy issues, the law generally, and certainly the tax law more specifically, has a path for you. So there are certainly areas there that we can find where we really lean on these skill sets beyond law and beyond tax for folks to come in and assist us in performing our jobs. So that was my first introduction to tax, and ended up taking a number of tax courses in law school. Still not really sure that's what my career would be, and still had some broader policy interests. So I graduated from law school and was very fortunate to have the opportunity to return to California and work for a federal judge in Los Angeles, Ronald S.W. Liu. And Judge Foley mentioned one of his mentors. I was fortunate to land with Judge Liu in Los Angeles, and he has since then been a mentor for me throughout my career. And I give him full credit for early on steering me back toward government work and back toward Washington, D.C. So I did that one-year clerkship, kind of assuming that I would be working for a law firm in Los Angeles. Back in California, took the California bar exam. And Judge Liu, recognizing that I had an interest in public policy, quickly turned me around, introduced me to a number of his colleagues on the bench in the Superior Court where he had come from, and on the federal bench, all of whom had worked for the Justice Department and other agencies in Washington, D.C. at some point in their career. So about every week, I would have lunch with one of his judicial colleagues and get a sense of what their career was, how they had come to serve as judges in Los Angeles. And uniformly, they steered me back to a starting point somewhere in government, and in particular, working with the Justice Department. So I applied for the Justice Department Tax Division, and I think the Tort Division at the time. But having an interest in tax from having taken some courses there, was given an opportunity to come back to Washington, D.C. and work in the Tax Division of the Justice Department. Which was a very unique position then. It's still the same now, but I actually had an office here in Washington, D.C., but my job was mostly to handle cases pending in courts throughout the West Coast. And most of those cases, although they were technically tax cases, had much broader issues involved. In the district courts, in the general courts of the federal government, a lot of the work that's being done there is collection type work, issues that really give you an opportunity to intersect with businesses and individuals across a very wide swath of the population. So it was, although somewhat tax focused, gave me an opportunity to handle a large number of cases that involve just myriad different issues with different businesses, different individuals, different situations in life, and really had a great opportunity there with the tax division. Ended up doing about a half dozen different jury trials, which for a young attorney is almost unheard of these days. All sorts of great experience working for the government. So really do credit Judge Liu for steering me down that path. I spent about 5 years at the Justice Department Tax Division, and then went into private practice for a few years, and actually made partner at a boutique tax firm here in Washington, D.C. And was in that position for just a few short months and thought, you know, I'd kind of gotten to where I wanted to be in my career. I'd been with the government, had a great experience there, been an associate and been made partner in a law firm. And then out of the blue, had an opportunity from a former colleague to join the Treasury Department Office of Tax Policy. And most of my career had focused on tax to some extent, but mostly litigation and litigation of tax cases. I really didn't know much about the Office of Tax Policy at the Treasury Department in the main Treasury Department building, 1500 Pennsylvania Avenue, right next to the White House, but a lot of kind of high level policy thinking going on there, not the litigation work that I had done before. So I went back and forth a little bit and talked to my wife and kind of thought about the opportunities and said, you know what, my original interest in life was, or at least through college, was policy-based. This is really a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. So left private practice, went to the Treasury Department and spent almost 4 years there doing policy work, working with folks on the Hill, working with tax regulations, working with folks at the IRS to implement tax policy. And had a great opportunity there, was another great interaction with the government and opportunity to work on the policy side of the tax law. From there, went back into private practice to my old firm for a couple of years. And then at some point working with a big firm, there were some mergers, as you see in law firms all the time, and found myself working at a very large global law firm where I didn't really feel like I was doing the work that I wanted to do. It was mostly big international corporations, very, very large cases, somewhat impersonal. I didn't really get the feeling that I had at the Justice Department that I was actually getting in and seeing the variety of cases and the variety really of life that you see in litigating cases for a different client base. So I jumped from the big firm. I had about 2,000 partners at that law firm. And as Sarah Julie said, I started my own firm out in California and really found the opportunity to work with the types of clients that I wanted to work with, businesses, individuals, and the types of cases I wanted to handle. So for probably the fourth or fifth time in my career, thought I'd found my home. That's what I wanted to do. I was back in California, kind of creating my own practice, doing the work I wanted to do, and then got the call to come back again to Washington, D.C., and the opportunity to serve as the chief counsel here at the IRS. And that is, again, one of those opportunities that only comes along once in a lifetime. So had worked for tax most, if not all of my career, and moved back across the country, I think for the third or fourth time in my career. And in March of 2019 was sworn in as chief counsel at the IRS. So I'm now here. We've got about 1,500 attorneys here at the Office of Chief Counsel, about a third of them here in the Washington, D.C. office, doing mostly regulations and guidance and policy work. And then the other 1,000 or so attorneys are in about 45 offices spread all over the country, doing litigation work and handling cases in front of the tax court mostly. So we interact with Chief Judge Foley and all of the judges on the tax court very regularly here in the Office of Chief Counsel, a big function of our work. So that's sort of a quick walkthrough how I got to be Chief Counsel, and look forward to talking to all of you this afternoon. And with that, I'll turn it back.
Thank you, Michael. So that was a little bit of background on each of our panelists, Chief Judge Foley, Sarah Julie, and then Michael. And as I mentioned, there were questions that came up when you registered, and we're going to hit the top 3 questions, and then we will go to some live Q&A. And so some of these questions are going to be answered that were asked in the live Q&A. The first one that I'm going to have our panelists answer is, and some of you touched upon this, but I think one of the questions that's also been in the live Q&A, in addition to how did you figure out what you wanted to do, is some questions have been specific to how did you find out you wanted to go into that particular field. We have some of our questions that have asked or have said that they're maybe interested in corporate, or Michael, how did you know that tax was sort of what you wanted to get into? And then Chief Judge Foley, did you know that you wanted to become a judge? So if I'll turn it over to Chief Judge Foley first.
Interested in tax after taking a class, and I was interested solely from a policy perspective. I went into college thinking that I wanted to be a lawyer, but I wasn't really sure what type of lawyer I wanted to be. I was thinking in some type of business lawyer, but I knew nothing about tax. And then after taking that class that talked about how taxes could be used to accomplish certain things, that really gave me a strong incentive to go into tax policy. Now, I early on in my career, and for many years, what I wanted to do was, I got out of law school and went to the IRS, and I became interested in one of my goals was to do tax planning for athletes and entertainers. So even in college, that was something that, after policy, kind of stoked my interest. I thought that I could do tax planning for athletes and entertainers, and set up the charitable foundations and charitable organizations of athletes and entertainers, and then do their planning. So throughout my career, that was something that I thought about doing. But I knew that I had to be prepared to do it. So one of the ways that I was going to prepare myself for it was to get the requisite education, law school, and then a graduate degree in tax, and also to get the technical expertise. And going to the IRS was certainly part of that plan. So throughout my career, doing tax planning for high-income individuals, athletes, and entertainers was something that was always in the back of my mind. But once I started working for the government, at each stop, I was really amazed with the kinds of experiences I was able to receive. So I was able to get great training at the IRS and develop a large amount of technical expertise. And then when I went to the Senate Finance Committee, I was able to work not just in a narrow area of the law, but I worked on a wide number of tax proposals and provisions. So my interest kind of developed over the years, and I was throughout my career, I was never really interested in tax litigation. I wasn't interested in tax litigation when I went to law school. I wasn't interested in tax litigation while I was at the IRS or the Senate Finance Committee. So how did I end up becoming a judge? Well, the opportunity presented itself when I began working for the Treasury Department, the Office of Tax Policy. But prior to that, I had no interest in being a judge. That was never on my list of career goals. But I was blessed and soon realized that that became my dream job. I was really young when I was offered the opportunity, and then once I got on the court, I quickly realized that it was a perfect job for me. And I also realized how my previous experiences prepared me very well to do the job of a judge. But being a judge was never my career aspiration. I was thinking about using my tax expertise to do sophisticated tax planning. But the government experience led me in a different path. So that just means that many of you are, have an idea of what you want to do, but you have to be flexible, and you'll learn that when you work in different places, it'll open up other opportunities for you and really expand your horizons. And you may end up doing something like me that you never really intended to do, but each job you take will impart you with will give you certain skills and certain abilities that are going to help you later on. So I just encourage you to kind of pursue what you're interested in, but be very flexible in what that next step is going to be, because you really never know what is in store in the future.
Thank you. I'm going to go on to our second top question that was asked. And it's also been asked a lot in the chat box, or in our Q&A box, and that's, what major do you recommend for law careers? What is the best way to prepare for law school? And so I know everyone had political science, I believe, as one of their majors, but Michael and Chief Judge Foley also had an additional major. One I think was economics, maybe one was history. So Michael, if you can take this one on first.
Sure, and I think this goes back to what I was saying earlier, and encouraged to see so many folks who are interested in STEM and things outside maybe policy or things that you might think is the logical stepping stone to law. Because I think in my mind, what you really need to do is find your own core interest, and that may have something to do with law. It may not. It may be a policy based, like Judge Foley and I have had a background in. But as I said, I think there are plenty of paths, particularly in college and maybe even in graduate school beyond college, that do serve you very well in coming into a career in the law. And I think the most important thing is to find an area that you're interested in and that you like and that you love, and that, a job is not a job and a school is not school. It's something that you actually really enjoy. Because law school is very flexible and the practice of law is very flexible. It's not like becoming a doctor where you have to have biology and chemistry and you have to really have those prerequisites to get into law. Much of what I learned in law school, I had no introduction to at all in undergraduate. And I was certainly there in school with students who had come from engineering or come from biology or come from chemistry or come from the languages. And law school really does kind of give you a fresh start. And as long as you've got a good sense of intuition and a desire to learn, it doesn't matter so much what your undergraduate degree is. I think, and as I said, if you've got something that you're pursuing in college, that may be something that complements your experience in law school. So patent lawyers, for example, all have technology undergraduate degrees. You can't be a patent lawyer and a member of the patent bar unless you've got a technology background, and that's a prerequisite. So I'd really encourage folks just to think about what you enjoy doing and pursue that interest through college and maybe even through graduate school. And if at some point you see law school as a complement to that, and you might practice law in that particular area, that's sort of what I'd encourage people to do. And that way, you've got a more fulfilled life. It's not like you went down some particular path because somebody told you it was the right path to go, and you regret that 4 years later as you're graduating from college. And I think law school really is flexible in the way that we accept people in the law school that have a very wide diversity of backgrounds, academic and otherwise. So I really encourage you to think about what interests you, not necessarily look at it like there's a script you have to follow to get into law school.
Yeah, and I'd like to second that, because what is indeed most important is what you like to do, because the subject area that you enjoy that's the one that you're going to do well in, because you're going to want to spend the time, and you're going to want to focus on it. And it's not going to seem like it's not going to seem like work to you. You're going to actually enjoy it. And that's what I was able to do. And Chief Counsel Desmond did the same thing. We found something that we really liked to do, and then we just worked really hard. And if you follow that same path, you're going to serve yourself well. So the focus has to be on, well, what do you really like? What do you really enjoy? And I really caution against, going to, finding a magazine or going on the internet and looking for, well, which job is going to pay the most money, or which job has the highest starting salaries, and then say, okay, well, that's what I want to be. No, that's not the right path, because each of you have skills and gifts that only you have, and you have to figure out how the skills and gifts that you have can be used. And you can do that by finding out what you like, becoming really good at it, and then finding out what career best suits your skills, your abilities. So yeah, focus on what you like, and then go from there.
Sarah Julie, did you want to add anything to that particular question?
Nothing that Chief Judge Foley or Chief Counsel Desmond didn't already say, but I will emphasize on the fact that, honestly, any major that you choose is sufficient to get into law school. Even I had a law school classmate who majored in art and did well in law school. So again, I would reiterate that you should, in regard to your major in college, you should pursue whatever you're passionate about, whatever you're interested in, and then use law school to further it. And as a political science major, I wasn't in any advantage over my law school classmates who maybe majored in history or, I don't know, theater. It's all the same. Law school is a whole new step. So really pursue what you are interested in college, because what law schools do care about is your grades. So if you're in a major that you hate and your grades are poor, that will not look good in your application.
Thank you. And then the other question that came up is, what is the most rewarding part of your career, and what has been the biggest obstacle you've faced? And I'm going to start with you first, Sarah Julie.
The most rewarding part of my career, I would say, is I just started my law school career. I didn't graduate not too long ago. I graduated last year, May of 2019, from law school. So I am a newbie, a new lawyer. And in doing the clerkship, I would say the most rewarding part is having that close interaction with my judges. It's something that a lot of attorneys may not have the opportunity to ever have if they don't do a clerkship. In law school, I never thought I would do a clerkship. Whenever the law school had different events about it, I never went, because I was like, I'd never do a clerkship. That's not for me. I know what I want to do. And behold, here I am in a clerkship. So never say never. But having that close proximity to my judges and being able to talk with them and really pick their brains about the way that they may decide on certain cases, or the way that they're interpreting the law and applying it, I think is really invaluable to me as a new attorney, and really gaining those crucial attorney skills such as legal research and legal writing. I believe that those skills are crucial no matter what area of law you practice, whether you do transactional work or you choose to go into litigation. And as a clerk, that is the majority of my job, is legal writing and legal research. And it also has been rewarding in that I've learned how to get things done quickly, but still efficiently at the same time. So there are times where my judge may ask me to go and research a specific legal issue, and I may only have like about 15 or 20 minutes to look it up and, you know, have a full understanding of it, and then come and tell him whatever it is that he needs to know. And I think having that skill of being able to work in like a fast-paced environment, but still be efficient in your work is crucial as an attorney as well. And for obstacle I've faced, I'd say the biggest obstacle I'd say is kind of within myself, and just constantly telling myself wherever I am, like I'm there for a reason, and it wasn't by chance or by luck, and I deserve to be there, and I've worked hard to be there. Especially in a field like law, at times it can be intimidating, and you can look at your peers and people around you and think that you just don't belong. I think like it's coined as like imposter syndrome, and I've experienced that a bit, like in the beginning of my clerkship and like throughout law school. And sometimes it can creep up a little bit, but just constantly telling myself that I am where I am today because I deserve to be here. I've earned it. I've worked hard, and it's not by chance. And that's important because when I don't feel confident, that impacts my work in a negative way. But the more confident I feel about myself, then the better I am at getting my work done.
Thank you. Chief Judge or Michael, would you like to answer that one as well? And then we'll go into some live Q&A.
Well, at each of my jobs that I've had, I don't know if I can identify the most rewarding part of my career. Probably the thing that I enjoy most is I enjoy teaching and mentoring, because it gives me an opportunity to pass along all the things that I've learned throughout my career to someone else. And I learned early on how important mentoring and teaching others, the impact that it had on me. So it enabled me to fulfill my dreams. So my whole career has been fascinating, because at each step I enjoyed what I was doing. So I've never had a job since law school that I didn't enjoy. I thoroughly enjoyed working at the IRS and gaining technical expertise. At the Senate Finance Committee, I thoroughly enjoyed drafting regulation and being involved in that process of the development of legislation. Then when I went to the Senate Finance Committee, serving on task forces that develop things like enterprise zones and worked on programs like the earned income tax credit that affected millions and millions of people. That was fascinating. It was very rewarding for me to leave the Treasury Department and be the first African American appointed to the tax court, and being able to serve on the tax court for more than 25 years, and then become chief judge for the last 3 years. Those are all very important milestones. But the thing that I enjoy the most is experiencing all of that, and then being able to explain it to someone else and encourage other people to shoot for their dreams. So that's what I really those are the highlights of my career, and the thing that I really enjoy is being able to talk about that and pass it on to others. Now, in terms of obstacles, I've had a lot of things that other folks might consider obstacles, but I've just kind of viewed them as opportunities. I was always taught that to focus on excellence and ignore things that might be standing in the way. So some might call the fact that I got thrown out of college and had to come back and all of that as a major obstacle, but it was a blessing to me because it changed the way I operated and the way I thought about my career, and it gave me an additional incentive. So I've had a lot of things happen to me in the past. Failed a bar exam. So you fail a bar exam, you take it again. You know, there are things that happen to you that you just have to, you know, don't view it as a major impediment. Just think of it as something that you have to overcome and deal with. So I try not to focus on the impediments. I just focus on the opportunities.
I love that, Chief Judge Foley, failure as an opportunity. Michael, were you going to add?
Sure. Just quickly to pick up on what Chief Judge Foley said, I've been very fortunate in my life to have parents that really instilled a sense of public service in me, and a number of mentors over the years. I mentioned Judge Liu, who I clerked for right out of law school, that also helped to instill a sense of public service. And I think that has provided opportunities for me that have been in public service and 4 jobs over the course of my legal career, at the court, at the Justice Department, at the Treasury Department, and at the IRS, that have been in public service. Chief Judge Foley mentioned earlier that what you should not do is look for the highest paying job, either coming out of college or coming out of law school, because that is not a recipe for a rewarding career. And when you go into public service, I can tell you that those are not the highest paying jobs on that list. But there is a greater reward to having those kinds of jobs and those kinds of positions. And for me, in each one of those different positions at the court and at DOJ and at Treasury and here at the IRS, I am surrounded by dozens and hundreds and thousands of people who are all working in public service because their mindset is the same as mine. That at the end of the day, there's a reason why you want to do the work that you do, that you're serving the American people, you're serving other taxpayers. And that really does have a sense of reward that goes far beyond any kind of monetary compensation you would ever earn. And so those jobs that I've had have been very fulfilling for me. And I keep coming back again and again. And I do go into private practice, and I have had a couple of jobs at law firms, which have also had their own rewards. But really the most rewarding part is to have associated myself with people who are all like-minded in their ultimate goal of some form of public service that really does create different opportunities and different rewards career-wise. And in terms of obstacles, there are many. I think we all have obstacles that we faced. I guess for me, and being a tax lawyer and surrounded with a number of folks that are really technical tax lawyers, and although I've been doing this for 25 years, I still consider myself in some respects more a trial lawyer than a tax lawyer. But I do have a very kind of pragmatic personality. And that has been a bit of a barrier through the course of my career, particularly as a younger associate, where I didn't appreciate the purpose and the reason why we're doing some long drawn out memo or taking different steps. I look at the work that I'm doing very pragmatically. Well, how is this moving the ball forward? Why are we doing this? And that has been an issue for me. I think right now I've gotten to the point in my career where I do see the bigger picture. But as a younger attorney, and even before law school, kind of would question why the task was in front of me that I was doing without being able to see the bigger picture, because I had that more pragmatic, what are we doing to move the ball forward here? So a little personality trait there, I think, that I wouldn't call it that an obstacle, but just something that I have wrestled with over the course of my career. I've been able to overcome, obviously, and focus on, as I said, the public service jobs that I've had as the most rewarding part of my career.
Thank you, Michael.
And Christina, one thing I want to add is that everybody who's on this call, they're all going to experience some failure at some point. And what's important is how you respond to it. And because you're going to fail exams, you aren't going to do as well as you think you should do. You may not be able to major in the thing that you plan to major in, and you have to make certain adjustments. But you should never think that that your inability to accomplish one task is going to kind of ruin your life, and you won't be able to fulfill your, you know, your dreams. You have to be able to bounce back, and you have to be resilient, and you have to have faith. And those are going to be the things that are really going to drive you, because it's so important to have a really strong engine and work ethic, because that's going to allow you to overcome a lot of things that might you know, kind of stop you in your tracks.
Thank you, Chief Judge Foley. So we did answer some of the questions that were asked in the chat, but we do have a few, and we will stay on a little longer to answer a few of those related specifically to law school. So we have a question that they want to know about your experience in law school. Did you struggle? And then specifically, if you were a first-gen student in law school, how was that experience for you, and did you have family support? And so, since Sarah Julie just mentioned she finished last year, we will have her start first.
My experience in law school, it was good. Of course, there were challenges that I had to go through, that every law student goes through, but overall, I would say that it was a good law school experience. Dickinson Law, their student population is small, intentionally so. They keep it small so that there is that intimacy between the students and the teachers and your classmates, and also the known, what's the word? Competitive. Every law school is competitive, but there are certain law schools who are known to be a lot more competitive than others. That the toxic competitiveness that some law schools have, Dickinson does not have. Of course, they're still competitive, but it's not to the point where it's toxic. And so being able to go to law school in a healthy, competitive environment was very, very good experience for me. I would say as a first generation law student, of course, that in itself presents more challenges than someone else who may have a dad or a mom or uncle or, you know, someone in their family who's already a lawyer. In being first generation, that was pretty difficult because it wasn't like I had anyone to turn to per se in my family. But as Chief Judge Foley said, you just have to continue persevering, keep putting your best foot forward, and you're going to get through it. As you go through law school, it does get easier. I would absolutely say my first year of law school was the most difficult, the most challenging, required the most, I say change in the way I thought, the way I studied, in regards to like balance between my personal life and school, required the most adjustment. And you won't be the only first generation student in your school. So I know what helped me a lot is being able to speak to other first generational students and you know, just being able to relate to someone who understands your struggles that maybe a lot of your other classmates don't understand. So that was also nice. But again, if you just continue to put your best foot forward, continue to keep your eye on the prize, you know why you're there. And again, don't have any lack of self-confidence. And I think you'll do great. But overall, my law school experience was good.
Yeah, well, for me, in college, I worked just nonstop, and I noticed that there was a formula. You know, I worked hard, and I put in the time, and I got really good grades. then when I went to law school, I didn't have to put in the amount of hours that I put in college. I mean, Swarthmore might be a little different than some institutions, but Swarthmore required a lot of time in the library. When I went to law school, it also required a lot of work. But what I had to do in law school, and it took me a year or so to just become used to kind of how I was supposed to write and the whole exam taking process. It took me a while to kind of figure out what was required for me to be successful in law school. So I'm a first generation student also. So I had to figure that out. And I remember my first semester in law school, and at Berkeley, 60% of the class gets passed. The next 30% gets honors, and then the top 10% get high honors. And I remember my first semester, and I just saw all these P's on my report on my report card. I was like, what happened here? You know, I didn't have any honors grades. And it wasn't that I wasn't working hard enough, but I had to figure out, you know, how to write the exam answers, and the whole issue spotting process and all of that was just totally foreign to me, and I had to learn that. And it took about a year and a half for me to figure all that out. So by my third year, I knew what I was doing, but the first year, I really didn't have a clue. So at each stage, you're going to have to learn, you know, what's required, and you have to make the requisite adjustments so that you can be successful. And that's just a part of life. You know, it's just like when you go to a new job, you have to figure out what the expectations are and what you need to do in order to be successful there. So law school is just like anything else you're going to encounter in life. You have to go there, you have to assess it, you have to figure out what you need to do, and then you have to make the necessary adjustments to be successful.
Michael, I'm going to have you tackle sort of this sort of mishmash of questions I'm going to put together for you.
Okay.
So a lot of it related to what it is they're interested through a legal career, whether they're interested in becoming a prosecutor, becoming a corporate law attorney, maybe being interested in politics, interested in maybe some social justice issues. So students and participants are asking sort of about exploring that, whether it's in law school or is it after law school? Any recommendations on that?
Sure. And I think this goes back to some of the discussion we had earlier. I in my career certainly never had any, you know, big aha moments where I realized, you know, I want to be the chief counsel at the IRS, or I even want to be a tax lawyer. I think it was an incremental progression. And I think that incremental progression is something everyone goes through. And some of it is chance, some of it's mostly opportunity. And a lot of it has to do with, you know, just basic interests that you've got in life, the kinds of people you want to associate with. And honestly, it has to do with, you know, the opportunities that mentors and folks that you will come across in your academic careers and studies and in your early jobs. And, you know, I don't think that is at all by accident. I think you'll find, you know, some steer in your own interests that will push you down a particular path. And you will find some like-minded people in those careers and those jobs that you start off in. And they help to give you a steer. You know, the folks that I've worked with that I point to as my mentors read me very well, and probably read me in many ways better than I could read myself, and helped to steer me in a particular direction. So I think it really is a matter of being eager and willing to work. And, you know, that's one trait that your mentors and your bosses and your colleagues will always appreciate. And if you're the kind of person that likes to roll up your sleeves and will roll up your sleeves and do any task assigned to you, if you're in a general area that is of interest to you, you will find people taking you under their wing and pushing you in a direction that will open up more opportunities for you. And that will just be a step-by-step progression through life and through your career. And as long as I said, you're always willing to work hard and dedicate yourself, even if you aren't really sure you're in the position you want to stick with, don't let that dissuade you. Try to keep a positive attitude about any position you're in, and you will encounter people throughout your careers that will, as I said, probably know you in some respects better than you know yourself, at least in terms of career potential, and help steer you toward things that will just end up complementing themselves year after year and job after job. So keep an open mind, keep your head down, really look for opportunities. And if you look for opportunities, they will generally present themselves one way or another. So very generic answer to that question, but I think that's a little bit of a summary as to how I got to where I am. And I think Chief Judge Foley has said some of the same things over the course of his career. So.
Yeah, those are all excellent points. And because, you know, I think back on my career, and I, other than my job at the IRS, that was the only job I had to apply for. Other jobs, folks came to me and they said, you know, we think that this would be a great job for you. You know, we'd like for you to pursue this opportunity. And that just goes from being diligent, working hard, and I've never thought that anything is beneath me. You know, I never thought, oh no, I don't want to do that as part of my responsibilities, because, you know, that's below me. You know, you do whatever you have to do in order to be successful at the job and get the job done. And I think with that attitude, no matter what your field, opportunities will open up for you, because everybody doesn't think that way. Mm-hmm. You know, some people just want to do just the minimum required to get by. But if you're willing to put in that extra time and that extra effort, then that stands out.
Thank you, Chief Judge Foley. I know, you know, we can be here all night. There are some great questions that were asked in the live Q&A. You all did amazing just answering some of the other questions that they also had throughout this. To sort of sum it up and to kind of leave you all with sort of just one last piece. If you can just maybe share a piece of advice, you know, to the participants here. A lot of them in their comments, you know, have shared, you know, just how wonderful it's been to participate in this, to also see a role model for themselves. So to see a Black lawyer, a Black chief judge as well. You know, they've commented on those things. And so I'll start with Sarah Julie. Any piece of advice you want to leave the participants with?
I would say that you should not let other people's fears or doubts or insecurities, don't let them project those things onto you. If you have a goal or you have a dream, no matter like how many people may tell you it's unlikely, as long as you just remain diligent in your work, remain faithful, and just continue to do the work that you need to do the hard work, then 9 times out of 10, you will get to where you want to be. So that's why I tell you, do not let other people's insecurities, fears, and doubts, don't carry them as your own. Don't let it project it onto you. And it's not only haters who will do that to you. Sometimes it may be your friends and your family who love you dearly, and they're not doing it in a malicious way. They may be doing it because they think they're protecting you or trying to keep you from failing. But just always know what your goals are and pursue them wholeheartedly. That's all. Thank you guys for joining.
Thank you, Sarah Julie. Michael?
Sure, I guess just a couple of quick thoughts. And we talked about opportunities a couple of times on this program. One very important thing I think to keep in mind is that if those opportunities come along, be sure you're in a position in life to take advantage of them. I think I've seen, particularly in the legal career, many people get jobs at law firms out of law school, and then they suddenly are driving fancy cars and living in big houses, and they aren't in a position to take advantage of opportunities that come along, in particular working in public service. So I've been fortunate through my career that when these opportunities have come out of the blue, and just like Chief Judge Foley, other than my first job, I haven't applied for a job since I came out of law school. And I've had opportunities present themselves to me, and sometimes they require significant pay cuts, sometimes they require a move across the country, but I've always been in a position to take advantage of those opportunities. And I've seen friends and colleagues from law school and throughout my career who weren't positioned to take advantage of those opportunities. And I think on reflection, they probably regret that. So try to keep in mind some flexibility so that when opportunities do present themselves, you're in a position to take advantage of them, and you don't regret not being able to take advantage of them looking back over the course of your career.
Thank you. Chief Judge Foley?
Yeah. Well, a couple of things. One kind of piggybacks on what Sarah Julie said, is that you have no control over how people perceive you. All you have control over is yourself. And you have to, so you have to focus on that. You can't let someone else's thoughts about you control what you think of yourself. When I was a kid, I had a terrible stutter, and in elementary school, I could barely get the words out. So I would hand in my exam, I handed my papers, and people were surprised that I was really smart. So I learned early on that not to let someone else's perception of me affect what I thought about myself. And that's something that has served me well throughout my career. But I learned that honesty and integrity are critical. That's something that no matter what job you have, if you're honest, if you're straightforward, and you have integrity, that is something that is valuable and is to be cherished. And you have to work for that. It doesn't just come. It doesn't just come naturally. It's something that has to be. You have to be intentional about it, and it has to be at the forefront of your mind. And the last thing I'd leave you with is, don't be afraid to ask for help. Throughout my career, there have been numerous times when I needed help from someone in terms of trying to figure something out. And I've never been afraid to approach someone and ask them for assistance. And that doesn't always mean, can this person give me a job? It can just mean that person providing you with a little tidbit of advice and a little bit of wisdom that's going to help you make the right decision. So don't be afraid to ask for help, and you may have to ask for help from someone who is not someone who looks like you. It may not be somebody in your family. It may be somebody who you would never think that this person might be interested in helping you. But the worst thing they can say is no, and the best thing they can do is provide you with some assistance that's going to help you along your way.
So I'd like to thank all of our panelists for joining us this afternoon on the West Coast and this evening on the East Coast. All our panelists are actually from, or currently in the East Coast, and not necessarily from the East Coast. I think I'm the only one from the West Coast coming from Southern California. But we thank you for joining us. We were really excited to host a panel focused on careers in the legal profession. And we'll look to do more panels focused on specific careers. There's some resources that you can definitely check out within the TGR Foundation. Also, Career One Stop is a really great resource that has a multitude of different career options that you can look to. And then, like I mentioned at the beginning of the webinar, we will be sharing this recording. So you can look back to this, and the slides will be shared. And so you can also link to the different resources from the slides. So thank you for joining us, and we wish you a great rest of your Thursday.